Most plane crashes have survivors. That single fact should change everything about where you sit. Because if survival is possible, then your seat choice is not superstition. It is a decision with a real answer, backed by real data, and most people are making it wrong every single time they board. The row you pick, the side you sit on, even how far you are from a door, these things have been studied after real crashes, measured in real wreckage, and the physics behind them is not complicated once someone actually explains it. So here it is. The full picture, from front to back, of where you want to be when things go wrong. And yes, there is a specific answer. You are not going to like where the cheapest seats usually are. The back of the plane has a reputation. People joke about it. You get on last, you get off last. You are near the bathrooms, the seats are smaller on budget airlines, and the engine noise on some aircraft makes conversation feel like shouting across a construction site. Nobody chooses the back on purpose. But here is the thing that crash investigators have known for decades. The tail of a commercial aircraft is, in most crash scenarios, the place where the most people walk away. A Time magazine analysis looked at every commercial jet crash in the United States, with both fatalities and survivors over a roughly 35-year period. They mapped out survival rates row by row using the actual accident records. Passengers in the rear 20% of the cabin had a survival rate of around 69%. Passengers sitting over the wing had survival rates in the mid-50s. Passengers near the front of the plane, in the first 15% of the cabin, had survival rates closer to 49%. That is not a small difference. That is the difference between a coin flip and a meaningful advantage. So why does the back survive more often? The answer starts with where crashes tend to do their worst damage and how energy travels through the airframe when something goes catastrophically wrong. Most commercial plane accidents that cause fatalities are not mid-air explosions. They are runway overruns, hard landings, controlled flight into terrain, or aborted takeoffs that go wrong. In nearly all of these cases, the nose hits first, or the ground contact begins at the front of the aircraft. The physics here is not subtle. When the nose of a plane meets a hard surface at speed, kinetic energy travels backward through the fuselage like a shockwave moving through a rod. The front absorbs the initial violence. The structural deformation, the crushing, the sudden deceleration, all of it is most severe where the contact begins. This is the same principle behind car crumple zones. Engineers design the front of a car to absorb crash energy so the passenger compartment survives. On a plane, there is no engineered crumple zone at the nose. The nose just goes first, and the people sitting in it absorb that energy with their bodies. By the time that wave of deceleration and structural collapse reaches the tail section, it has spread out, weakened, and in many cases, the tail section remains more intact than anywhere else on the aircraft. That is why flight data recorders and cockpit voice recorders are installed at the rear of the plane. They are there because engineers know from a century of accidents that the tail survives. If you are still skeptical, consider United Airlines Flight 232, which crash-landed in Sioux City, Iowa in 1989 after losing all hydraulic control. The plane cartwheeled across the runway. 111 people died, but 185 survived, and survival was heavily concentrated in the rear portion of the aircraft. Or consider the Avianca Boeing 707 that crashed into a hillside in New York in 1990. The tail section separated and remained largely intact. The survivors came from that section. Pattern after pattern in accident investigations points the same direction. Now, within the rear section, position still matters. The studies suggest that middle seats in the rear have a slightly higher survival rate than aisle seats in the same rows. That sounds strange until you think about it. In a lateral impact or a roll, middle seat passengers have people on both sides buffering them from flying debris and structural intrusion. Aisle seat passengers can be struck by luggage falling from overhead bins, by the aisle structure itself, or by other passengers. In a window seat, You have one wall of the aircraft directly beside you, which in some crashes is exactly where you do not want to be. The middle seat of a rear row is nobody's preference. It is also, according to the data, roughly the safest seat on the plane. Welcome to the cruel mathematics of survival. But here's the part that most people skip entirely when thinking about crashes, and this is where the story gets genuinely uncomfortable. In survivable crashes, the leading cause of death is not the impact itself. It is what happens in the minutes after. Fire and smoke kill more people in survivable aircraft accidents than the crash forces do. The National Transportation Safety Board has documented this repeatedly. Passengers survive the initial impact, they are conscious, they are mobile, and then they die because they cannot get out fast enough before smoke incapacitates them. Toxic smoke from burning aviation materials can render a person unconscious in as little as 60 to 90 seconds. 60 to 90 seconds. That is not a long time when you are disoriented, the cabin is dark, the aisle is blocked by people who have frozen in panic, and you do not actually know where the nearest exit is because you did not look when the flight attendant pointed. This changes the calculation in a very specific way. Your proximity to an emergency exit is not just a comfort thing, it is a survival variable that in many crashes outweighs the front-to-back position entirely. The research suggests that passengers seated within 5 rows of a working exit have substantially better survival outcomes in fire and smoke scenarios than those seated further away. So the full picture looks like this. The rear of the aircraft gives you a structural advantage in the initial impact, but that advantage only matters if you can then exit the aircraft quickly. The ideal seat is in the rear section of the cabin, within 5 rows of a rear exit, and in a position where you have mentally noted which way to move in the dark. Exit row seats at the rear of the aircraft represent something close to the best combination of both factors, which is why the people who know this tend to quietly select them. When you sit down on your next flight, count the rows to the nearest exit. Do not just look at the card in the seat pocket, actually count. If the cabin fills with smoke in under a minute, you will not be reading anything. You will be moving on memory and instinct, and the people who practice that count in their heads are the ones who move faster and get out first. There is one more layer to this that most people never hear. Studies of evacuation behavior show that passengers who sit in the aisle, in any section, evacuate faster on average than window seat passengers because they do not need to climb over anyone. In the rear section, near an exit, in an aisle seat, you have traded the slight lateral impact protection of the middle seat for a dramatically faster exit path. Both choices are defensible. The point is that you are choosing with information rather than just picking a seat because it has a power outlet. Aircraft are remarkably safe. The odds of dying in a commercial plane crash are genuinely tiny compared to almost every other form of transportation you use to get to the airport. But the reason to understand this is not to make every flight feel like a survival exercise. It is because there is a real answer, rooted in physics and accident data, and now you have it. Rear section, near an exit, know your rows, know your direction, and respect the 60 seconds. That is the whole thing. A decision that takes 30 seconds when booking could matter more than any other choice you make on that trip. And the people who know it are already quietly selecting row 28. If you liked this video, there is more like this, so follow the channel for the next one.